By 2009, you joined Bellator, and then in 2011, you came back to Strikeforce, and by 2013, you made your UFC debut.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what was it like after all those years to finally fight in the UFC? Because that's the creme de la creme.
Um, I felt like, not more than anything, I was like, man, it's long overdue. I had gotten offers before them, right before I signed with this company called Boda. Sorry, man, just got him from that plane. Beats me up. I got him
Okay.
offers from the UFC, but they weren't the best. They were actually like rather low compared to some of these other ones. And then I got offers to fight in Japan, and the UFC came with some numbers. And again, I chose the money. So I always wondered, should I have chosen just the UFC route, start at the very bottom and gotten my name way bigger, or do what I did, that I went all over the world fighting for a little bit more money, a little bit more guarantee, but my name, I wasn't known. Nobody really knew me in America. And so when I got to the UFC, I felt like I had a lot to prove. Though I was like 28, 29 years old. I had maybe 30 pro fights already. And I felt like, man, I got a lot on my plate here to handle, but I'm more than qualified to take on these tasks. I've been fighting all over the world. I've been fighting world champion, ex-world champions, top 5 guys in the world. This is going to be no different. But I'll tell you what, though, my first UFC fight, I did have a little bit of jitters. Just like, man, I'm finally here. Like, that was in the back of my head and in the crowd. Though it was still the prelims and it wasn't that big, it was still starting to fill up, and it was just different. It was a different speed with how everything moves.
Well, in 2017, you fought Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Was
Yes,
that
sir.
like your first really big UFC fight?
Um, Definitely, I would say so. I had fought another guys that were ranked, but not as high ranked as him either. But he was the biggest star, power, name, everything that I had fought at the time, by far.
Right. And you actually won that with a TKO.
Yes, sir. Knocked him out twice actually in that fight. Shout out to Cowboy because he's a hell of a warrior. And at the time, I think he was 4-0 at welterweight. He was I think either number 3 or 4 at the time in the world, and he was on a rampage. I think he had gone 4-0 with 4 stoppages at welterweight. And I remember having the fight in Colorado, his home state, Denver. And I was very well prepared for this fight. And I also knew stylistically he was a very good fight for me because he's a guy that likes to stand there in front of you and just throw bombs. And I kind of like that too. And it's a very fitting style for me. So I wanted to go to war with this guy and just show the world, man, I'm that good and better. I could be a world champion at this division 100%. And I had just moved up from 155. Not a lot of people were giving me the credit. They thought I was way too small for that weight class.
Okay, I mean, how did it feel after all these years? Now you beat a UFC superstar.
It was amazing. And I felt it like, well, to start off with, when I was in Strikeforce, I only had one loss, and that was to the champion. I was 6-1 or 5-1, and I came over. All the guys that were in the top 15, and I was ranked number 1. Got to fight top name guys, all through the roster. I never got to fight a top 5 guy at 155 pounds, and that was my weight class. That was the weight class I competed in almost all of my career. I still have more fights at 155 than I do at 170, and I was very, very hurt, brother. I'm not gonna lie that they didn't give me those marquee matchups, and yet they gave all these other guys that I had beat up and stopped some of them at Strikeforce. They came over to UFC and they were fighting top guy after top guy, and they wouldn't give me a guy. So I felt like, man, it was something against me. What the fuck? The world's against me. So on that time that I had to fight Donald Cerrone, it wasn't nothing really against him. I was trying to get under his skin a lot. It was more so like I felt so disrespected by the UFC. I'm going to make a statement, and that statement's going to be made on Donald's face. I'm going to fucking do everything to utterly separate myself from that guy and show the UFC, you guys have been fucking up. You've been putting all your marketing and chips on the wrong guys. It should have been me since the moment I crossed over from Strikeforce. And I really had a chip on my shoulder against Cowboy, for the reasons I just said.
Okay, well, then you kept fighting. In the UFC, you fought Damian Maia. You end up losing that fight
Yeah.
in a split decision. Then you fought Stephen Thompson. You end up losing that one as well.
Yep.
I mean, did that get to you? You won that huge victory, but then you had 2 losses after that.
Yeah, the Damian Maia fight was so close. It was time wise, it was split actually almost right in the half. It was like 7 minutes and 55 seconds of stand up, and then the rest was on the ground. And I did a lot of the damage. He did a lot of the control. So it was just how the referees or the judges were feeling that night. I felt obviously I was leaning towards me that I had won, but Damien got the nod, and I was like devastated, man, because winning that fight, I would have fought for the title against a much more favorable style for myself. The Thompson fight, I wasn't in the best spirits walking in that fight for like personal reasons, but I still felt I could pull it off. I still felt I was gonna get a win because he's a stand-up guy. I'm a stand-up guy. I'm gonna get the job done, and man, he completely shut me out, and it was one of his best performances, and it wasn't the best of mine. So hats off to Thompson. And then after that, I also have a couple injuries I've been nursing for some time, so I decided, you know what? Before I get back in the cage, I'm gonna get these injuries right, and get myself to 100% health.